But it's about 1 in the morning, and I've been doing this pretty much off and on, mostly on all day. And I am exhausted. So I need to go to bed. Okay guys, I'm going to get right to it. There's a lot to cover, so I'm going to not waste too much time. This is how I installed my stereo in my Wrangler with keeping the stock head unit. My overall goal of this was to make it look as stock as completely possible, and of course with an aftermarket head unit it does not look too stock. So I will be using an amplifier, line output converter. I will have component speakers. I will have coaxial speakers, and then an assortment of accessories to install it. All the necessary wires, all the RCA cables, some wire loom, and D-rings and things like that. For anybody that doesn't know, this is a 2014 Wrangler, so depending on your model year, it might be slightly different, but if it's a JK, for the most part, it's similar. So what I like to do first is, of course, tear down, get everything out that I'll need to, and then start from there. Of course, right now I'm just disconnecting the negative cable from the battery so that I can undo the airbag wires from the passenger seat, just in case. First step in the teardown is removing the passenger seat. You'll notice that I did not remove the 4 large bolts holding it to the frame. There's actually 6 smaller ones that leave that bottom portion there, and you'll see why I did that a little bit later on. There's a tray where the amplifier is mounted. And when removing the front dash panels, a couple of those plastic panel remover tools are really good to use. I forgot to mention that the seat belt comes off with a T40 Torx, and a 1/2 inch ratchet is your best friend in the world when getting at those 6 bolts underneath the seat, as a full socket will be too big. There's not enough room, so that ratchet wrench really comes in handy if you pick up one of those. Okay, back to disassembly of the dash. As you noticed, I already removed the automatic windows cluster there, and for that I used a 7mm socket with my impact wrench. Almost every single bolt you're going to take off is going to be 7mm, so keep that handy. Then under that one underneath the steering wheel just pops right out. More 7mm bolts under there to be taken out, and then you just keep on going down the line, and then eventually that top part pulls right off. I also wanted to point out that I took the doors off, which makes everything much easier. If you don't know how to take the doors off, then you probably shouldn't own a Jeep, and this stereo install is probably way over your head, so you might want to stop. For the side panels, use that same plastic panel tool and just pop that right out. Once that's removed, there's going to be 2 bolts that you're going to use that 7mm socket for. Those are holding in the front speaker housing. So just remove those for now, and then as you do a little more, you'll be able to pull the speaker out. Remove the glove box. It's pretty self-explanatory. You just gotta have to squeeze it in together, and you'll see how that pops out. Next, I used a small panel tool to just pop the tweeter out. Comes out pretty easily, just like that. And just disconnect it and just pull the whole thing out, because you'll need that for later. Next, I removed the rear speaker bar speakers. They're pretty simple. I believe it's a T25 Torx, or one of the smaller ones. They each have 3. You remove them and they drop right out, and then just disconnect the speaker. I set the grill covers aside because I'll be reusing them. If you're going to use the aftermarket speaker grill covers, then you probably don't need them anymore. So I started unboxing some more things like the amplifier, getting that ready. The next step I'll do is taking the 10 gauge power wire that I got and hooking it up to the fuse box. Now I got a single input, 2 output fuse distribution block for this. The 2 outputs will be running 4 gauge, 1 to the amp and then 1 to possibly a power inverter down the line. I'm not sure, so all I do is hook this up to that, place the ring terminal on it, and then it was time to install it and hook it up to the battery. I ran the 4 gauge wire down the inside there. About a foot or so down, there's a rubber grommet that I popped out the top to and slid that all down there. It was a bit of a pain, but it wasn't too bad. Then next I just took the distribution block that I had set up, hooked it up to the terminal, and that's basically what it looks like when it's done. Still had to put some wire loom on it, but other than that, it's good to go. Here's the amp sitting in the tray that I had bought for it off of eBay. There's a guy who makes them. They're out of aluminum, and then I just attached it to the seat frame. That way it keeps it up and off the ground, in case any water or anything like that gets in. This is an NVX amp. It's 5-channel. It's 800 watts total RMS, so it will power all 4 speakers, and it'll power a small 10-inch sub that I have for it for the back. It'll be plenty of power. Next, I started getting all the 4 gauge wire ready. There'll be 2 4 gauge wires running down on the inside there of the passenger side. One is of course going up and into that fuse distribution block that I'd shown earlier, and the second one is just going up there to a grounding point that's already there from the factory. Rather than drilling a new hole, I decided to use one that was always there. That seemed to work out best in the past. So then I just ran it underneath the carpet, up and down, and then over, and the inputs are in the back of the amp there towards the back seat. Since I'm using the stock head unit, I had to purchase what's called a line output converter. For those of you unfamiliar, since the head unit does not have RCA outputs, you need a way to create them so that they can go into the amplifier. So what the line output converter does is it takes the speaker wire outputs from your stereo receiver, goes into the line output converter, processes them, amplifies them, probably does some other stuff that I don't even know what, and then from the line output converter it creates the RCAs that then can go into the amplifier. Now I was a little apprehensive about doing this, but I did enough research on it that I felt pretty comfortable that it would work. And the RCAs actually don't have to be that long since the LOC is right on top of the amplifier. So I think I made mine maybe a foot long, 3 of them, 1 for front, 1 for rear, and 1 for the sub. And I'll actually be mounting it with that 3M hard Velcro type material, so it won't move, and then also so I can pop it up and pull it out if I need to adjust any of the settings on it down the line. And there's plenty of room underneath the seat to do that. So it also will take the remote feed that's into the amplifier. I'll just take it from that and put it into a remote right from the LOC. Now it should also have an automatic sensor, the amplifier does, so it can sense if the LOC is on, but I figured what's the difference if it already has a terminal for it. On to speaker wire. So I basically started measuring wire for the front speakers, and I just ran them both also down the channel of the passenger side. Of course the passenger side speaker will stop right there, then the driver side speaker will just go across underneath the dash, and I just made it long enough for the, just give me enough room when I go to install the driver side speaker. 4 gauge wire zip tied, the bass control knob wire, and then the speaker wire will also be zip tied. Since I'm running all new speaker wire from the amplifier, I realized as I was taking the rear speakers out and trying to run the new wire, it would just be a lot easier if I just took the whole unit down. So that's what I did. It really wasn't that bad. It's just 4 bolts on each side, and it comes, and then 2 in the middle, and it comes right off. Then I just fished the new wire through the rubber grommet where the old wire was. Alright, rear speaker time. These are the Polk Audio DB651 coaxial speakers. They're 6.5 inches and they're 120 watts RMS per pair. And I did have to do a slight bit of modification to it, which I will show you. But other than that, they fit perfectly. And also, if I was using the grates that they came with, they'd fit just fine. These speakers do come with 2 mounting brackets, and the only thing that I had to modify was there's one kind of long piece on each of the brackets that I actually just had to drill a hole through. And there's the rubber grommets there too. Here's where I had to modify the stock speaker grate a little bit. I just took a Dremel with a small bit on it, and I just tried to cut away at as much of the plastic in the middle as I could, because the tweeter in the coaxial speaker was pressing up against it just a little bit, and I didn't want it to, so just cut a little bit out, put it back on, and there was a tiny bit of room for it. Here is where I had to drill that hole out. I took the bracket that came with the speaker, took the stock speaker grate, and just put them over top each other. I matched up 2 of the holes in the grate to the main 2 holes on the bracket, and then that one longer piece that didn't match up, I just took a silver marker, pushed through the last hole on the stock speaker grate, so it made a mark, and then just drilled the hole out, and then it was all set. Then all that's left to do is just reinstall the speakers into the soundbar. Of course, make sure you put the soundbar back in first. Then your wire should already be in there. Attach them and make sure you fill the soundbar with a good amount of polyfill. You can get it easily off of Amazon or any craft store. It really, really helps. And the end result is the new speaker with the factory grate on top of it, and it looks stock. Now it's time for the front speakers. These are the Polk Audio DB6501 component speakers. So they come with a tweeter and a crossover in addition to the 6.5 inch woofer. Now this is the one part that I was a little bit unsure about because I haven't done component speakers. So I actually found a great YouTube video that really helped out with this, and I'll actually link it at the end of the video along with another one that I kind of used to help me out with my install. So here I'm just disassembling the speakers. I believe I used the original screws, so keep them, because you're actually going to mount the new speakers to this enclosure and not using a bracket. Now that I have the speakers out, I'm starting by taking out the crossovers and undoing the screws, and then I'm going to pop off the top because I'm going to try and put it into the speaker enclosure and try and get a fitting on it, and then I will have to screw it into it to the side. The best place to mount the crossover is on that inside wall there. I did have to break out the Dremel again and just cut away a tiniest piece inside, but then it laid flat and I was able to screw it in. If you don't have one of these attachments, I suggest you get one. It'll be really helpful for this part. It just makes a 90-degree attachment for either a Phillips or flathead or whatever you're using, and in this tight of a space, I found it very beneficial. So I would recommend picking one of these up if you don't have one. So now it's just securing the crossovers into the speaker enclosures, and once that's done, it's time to get working on the tweeters. So as I said before, the tweeters do not fit the stock enclosure or the stock housing for them, so I have to break out the grinder and kind of go to work. So just don't fit. Actually, not just don't fit, they're way too big. So I had to grind off quite a bit of plastic to have them slide in there. Alright, now I'm hooking up the speaker wire to the crossover, and I used 16 gauge speaker wire for all this in this install. I forget if I mentioned that before. So I cut a section of it that I'm actually going to use quick connects to connect to the speaker wire that's in the car, just so it's a lot easier, so I can take the speaker enclosure out if I need to. So that'll leave two wires coming out of the back of the enclosure. One is the main input wire that comes from the amp. The second will be the wire that feeds up to the tweeter. And then there's one more wire, but that's internal. That's just to go from the crossover to the speaker. And then now, see that grommet in the back? It's where I just cut a slit in it and then pulled the two speaker wires out and pushed it back in. Don't forget the polyfill again. I stuffed a ton of it in there. Okay, once that's in, hook up the speaker. Settle it in there. Now you notice I do not have the bracket on it. What I did is I just put it in here, took a silver Sharpie, marked the holes, and then just drilled 3 new pilot holes in the enclosure itself, and then used the original screws to mount the speaker to the enclosure. So the only thing that's in between the enclosure and the speaker is the rubber grommet. There's no bracket at all. Here's a better view of the wires coming out of the back of that rubber grommet there. I just left the stock quick connect there in case for some reason I ever go back to stock, which I don't think I would, but you never know. And here's a close-up of the crossover in there with all the wires connected, just so you can get a better idea in case it was kind of hard to tell before. And that's how it's mounted. Not too tricky if you just take your time. If you have any questions, comments, leave them below. I'll make sure to get back to you. And then this is the speaker when it's done. Use the original screws. Just have to put that last one in there. See the original holes though? Did not use them. Did not use the factory screw holes for it. Then it's just time to put the speaker back in, hook up your wires, screw the speaker enclosures back in, and then after that I just kind of clean up the wires, just kind of put them all together, tuck them out of the way, or you can connect them to an existing wire, make sure they don't go anywhere. And there's a shot of the speaker. You can tell it's not the factory one, but they're really hard to get that good of a look at it like that. And there's just the tweeter wire kind of bundled up. And that's how the tweeter looks after all that modification we did to it, and then it sticks right in the housing there. You could use some epoxy if you want, but mine works fine without it. And you just snap back on there. After all the speakers are finished, now it's time to run the speed wire. For those of you who don't know what speed wire is, this stuff is great. What it is 9 18 gauge wires in one large wire together. A lot easier to deal with than all those wires separately. So what I did is I ran it from the LOC down the side and then up across the front console piece there. Then it'll go underneath the dash and it'll come up to where the head unit is. Now what this will do is I will attach it to the speaker wires from the head unit, and then that'll run into the line output converter. So it'll send the head unit will send the signal through these speaker wires down into the line output converter to process and turn into RCAs. One of the reasons I chose to send it this way by the center console instead of where all the other wires are going. It's because I read that sometimes the power wire can give off a signal, and since the head unit is sending signal through these wires into the line output converter, I didn't want there to be any, any feedback or any noise in there that could do it. Now, I'm not 100% sure if that's really the case. I'm not an expert, but I was able to do it this way, and it actually used less speed wire. So I figured, if I could do it, why not? Why not even, take the chance of that? Then once it's fished through, it's just connecting it to the head unit, but that'll be a little bit later on. Just in case you couldn't tell, this is how it looks inside, how it's routed up towards the head unit. Now on to hooking all those wires that you just ran up to the amplifier and hooking them up to the line output converter. Now this is a pretty simple process, tedious but simple. I'm not going to spend really too much time on it, so we can keep moving here. And as you can see, the terminals for the 4-gauge wire and also the remote in are right there, and that's the amplifier as well. So as we strip, as we twist, and then it goes right in, and with a Phillips head screwdriver, it just clamps down on them, and that's for the amplifier, and that's pretty easy. And actually it's the same process for the line output converter, just the wires are a higher gauge, so they're a little smaller. Now the sub I chose for this, I just wanted to go with something really cheap. I wanted something small, so I got a truck box. I wanted at least a 10-inch sub, and this one can put out 300 watts RMS max, so I mean, it seemed pretty good. I really didn't care about the reviews. I just wanted something small, cheap, compact, and it actually worked pretty good. Okay, on to hooking up the speaker wires. First step, of course, is removing the head unit. Just those 4 bolts right there. Don't get too overwhelmed with it. And next is a picture of the connections that I made. So you can see the stock wire harness. You just cut off all of the speaker wires and connect them to that speed wire that I ran. It's pretty simple, straightforward if you just connect the colors and then connect them to the LOC. I connected it this way just as a test to make sure everything was working before I made them almost permanent connections, and that's kind of what it looked like. So you just take whichever speaker output it is from the head unit and match it up with whichever color you decide for your input into the LOC. So here is a diagram of what the stock head unit has as an output, and then I just matched it up. Now keep in mind, mine is a 2014. Not 100% sure if it changes it at all in the JK from year to year, but this is what I used. Now all that's left is to pick where you want to get your remote power from, and I use the cigarette lighter. It's a blue and pink wire, so I tapped into that, and the speed wire actually includes a remote wire, so then that also went down to the LOC. Alright everybody, it is day 2, unfortunately, of a stereo install. Took a little longer than I thought, as with, as everything does, but made a lot of progress, and that's the main part. The LOC on top of the amp is all wired, everything works, tested it out. I have the head unit there because right now I just have all the wires kind of hooked together, but not permanently yet. So I have to finish that, which will take a little bit of time. I have to pull it out, do that now. So as I briefly showed you before, this is the connection. As you can see, that black connector piece is the stock head unit's wire harness. So I clip that on all the speaker wires, and then the blue piece of wire here with all the little wires in it, that's the speed wire. And based on that diagram that I had there, I'm in the process of connecting all the wires after I had tested them. So I'm using a butt connector to connect them, and then on either side I'll be using some heat shrink tubing to protect them and pretty much make a permanent connection. Now, I'm not going to go through all 8 wires, but I at least wanted to show you almost a step-by-step how I connected them. So I'll just show this one wire, and then I'll move on. One of my main goals with this was to install it so that it didn't look like there was an amplifier under the seat. As you can see, you can't see anything that even resembles an amplifier. This right here, that's that aluminum bracket that comes down an inch or 2 inches, goes over and then comes back up, and I just mounted it to the rail. If you go around, you don't even start to see the amp until you get to about here, and who's ever going to be able to do that? So it's all pretty well hidden for the most part, and it's up off the floor, not on the floor, which is key. You know, as the you know, the see this slants back a little bit, so as it gets closer, it gets close, but it is not on the ground. There's still a good at least half an inch because of this bump here, and then down here there's a good amount. And if we go to the back and the back seat, I mean, you can't even really see it until you start to see the power and ground until you go down this low. So that's pretty good. So even if I run doors off, you know, it's pretty hidden. Since I have kids, I probably won't have doors off too much. So yeah, everything's actually back together. I'm done. That was a pain, but a big accomplishment.
We can eat them.
What are you doing back there?
We can eat them.
Eat them? No, honey. Those are speaker wires.
Ah.